Today, I'm going to be making the internet's coolest 3D printed Pokemon projects in increasing difficulty. And in the end, I'm going to take an element from each project for a grand finale Mewtwo. Now normally on this channel, I try to make projects from scratch with my own ideas, but today I really want to showcase some cool creations from the internet. Especially since, I have to admit, some of this stuff is even cooler than what I've made. As I said in the beginning, I'm going to start simple and then gradually increase the difficulty of the projects while also acquiring skills along the way. So let's get started right away with the Starmie Fidget Spinner by Nova7171 found on MakerWorld. To print this out, it's pretty simple. It's just 2 plates and just make sure you have the matching colored filament. Oh, by the way, almost all the materials I use for these projects can be found in the description, so if you're worried about color matching, I got you covered. For the second print, if you don't have a multicolor printer, you can use your slicer software. I'm using Bambu Studio.
Full disclosure, Bambu Labs is sponsoring this video.
To pause at a layer height so you can manually change the filament. Now that we have everything printed out, it's time to figure out how to put everything together. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, this took me a while to figure out, but you have these large circle spacers and these smaller circle spacers, with the center skewered by the axle. And I'm not gonna lie, I was having trouble fitting everything with the axle provided, so I had to size it down to
7.8 millimeters by 7.8 millimeters.
And now that everything's together, we can give it a good spin. And yeah, it's simple, a nice distracting desk toy, but there's a lot more to learn before we start the Mewtwo project. Next up, we have these sleek Unown Magnets from Lambda, also on MakerWorld. I like these because they remind me of those fridge magnet letters I had as a kid, but you know, with a Pokemon flair. And it's a big rig video, so you know. For this, I once again used my Bambu A1 and AMS light combo to make this multicolored print, but again, you can use a double pause technique if you really wanted. Now that we have everything printed out, it's time to turn on a podcast and glue in all 26 of these magnets. And yes, now your friends can come over and spell funny words on the fridge, but I also want to show off something a bit extra. You see, I also made a second set to match Shiny Unknown.
But I'm not done yet!
Because when you shine a bit of UV light over them, they are super radiant in the dark. Honestly, cooler than any other glow-in-the-dark decorations I had as a kid.
But I'm not done yet!
Because Lambda also did a follow-up project to make the box from the Pokemon movie Spell of the Unknown, where their ancient Scrabble powers were contained. And yes, this one you should really be using a multicolored system for, unless you got some really good paint skills. But with this box, you can easily fit both the regular and the shiny magnets inside. So with this project complete with some extra credit, we can add multicolored prints and magnets to our skill list. So I'm in the editing bay right now, and yeah, I know, pretends, whatever. Next up, we're going right back to Gen 1 with this awesome Blastoise Fountain by Brees Art on Cults. First thing to do is print out all the fountain components, and I'm going to be using some of my spare marble filament I had laying around just because I thought it would look cool. And because the Blastoise is 4 colors, it will take some time to print, but I really think it's worth the wait. Oh, and also, if you've been wondering how I've been able to do all of these cool multicolored time lapses with my A1, I actually just released a video on my second channel that goes over exactly that, so, you know, check it out after this one if you want. But returning to the fountain, I'm going to coat the entire basin with a coat of epoxy resin. There might be some other sprays or solutions you could use, but this is what I know works best. And now I was planning on using the submersible water pump to power everything, but clearly I need something with a bit more horsepower. Turtle power? Whatever, this should do the trick. Especially because I can lay out on its side, so it'll just fit right in. Now just to attach the hose and screw in Blastoise. And because I'm feeling a bit extra again, I bought some blue moss to place around Blastoise and the fountain to really give it that garden authenticity. But enough talking, it's time to plug it in. I feel calm just looking at it. Not even kidding, I'm probably gonna make some space in my room for this, which I can't even say for many of my own projects. I'll just have to worry about cleaning out the moss from time to time. And now we can add the skill of liquids to our arsenal. A very important step for our Mewtwo finale. Moving on to the next project, it's actually an idea I had earlier this year. It was going to be a Minior in its Meteor form with all the different parts held together by magnets, and then you could take it apart, revealing its core form. And with its core form, you could change the color of its light to be any color of the rainbow. The only problem is I was beaten to the punch by Xnilio Prints. So if you want this model, you'll have to pay a few dollars on their Patreon, but I think it's worth every penny. Printing out the outer shell was pretty painless, but I really wanted to step up my game for the inner shell. Not only did I add a smiley face because I felt that was missing, but I also want to print this thing out in resin for maximum glow, and as you know, I don't have a resin printer yet, so you know who I'm gonna call.
Supreme Grandmaster, we have news from the front. We can't make out their strategy. That's unfortunate, Sergeant. Why don't you come back to my tent and we can see if we can make out their strategy together. Make out together. Grandmaster, Sergeant.
Oh, hey, yeah, good timing. I was just watching your Spiritomb video. Did you broke into my yard? No, I'm not helping you after you broke into my... Wait. That's a lot of doubloons.
Alright, with Harry paid off, we are back in business. Now these files weren't exactly made for resin printing, and we had to do some trial and error to actually get this to print out, but eventually...
There are some supports on the inside, so it didn't collapse. Can't see it too well through the filter while it's curing, but look at the boy!
So now that we have everything, it's time for me to glue in the smallest magnets I've ever seen in my life. But as long as you triple check your polarities, everything works out just fine. And as I add this puck light to the resin print for the glow, we can finally see this Minior in action. And if you're feeling really spunky, you could print out a Minior for every color form it has, but I'm just going to stick to this camera trick instead. Now that we have the power of resin on our side, let's move on to a pair of Pokemon people have wanted me to make for some time. Both before and after my Pokédoku video where I made a Lampent, people wanted me to make a Litwick in Chandelure, which I stated I didn't want to do since others have already done it. So today, I'll be showing off this Litwick tea candle holder by Aleph 3D, remixed by Marchinator. And I'll also be printing out this desk Chandelure by Reed Bean on MakerWorld. There's also this really cool life-sized IKEA light conversion kit by 2501 EXE, but unfortunately, don't have the time for that today. So let's start with this Litwick I printed out. It's nice and can definitely hold a tea light, but I want to do even better. So I'll be taking one of these flickering tea light candles and designing a new housing for it to better match the shape of Litwick's flame. And this led me down a mini rabbit hole, like, is this flame blue, purple, indigo? I couldn't quite tell. Eventually, I settled on this PETG translucent filament that claims to be blue, but I don't know, the color looks a little ambiguous to me, so I think that fits this perfectly. So let's just crack open this light, plop it in, and now we have the most accurate looking Litwick project I've seen yet. Now, moving on to Chandelure, there weren't really many instructions listed for how to do the electronics, so let me show you how I made this happen. First, I'm going to need to harvest 7 LEDs from the flickering tea lights, but now between all these LEDs, 300 ohm resistors, my shoddy soldering job on a perf board, push button, battery pack, and a whole spaghetti serving of wires, things got a little messy. Thankfully, this was designed with magnets in mind, so you don't have to permanently fix everything into place while you figure things out. Even with that, this took quite some time for me to finagle back into place, but eventually I got everything anchored in place. And so, it's time for the reveal. Okay, I'm now done hearing about the Litwick line on this channel, okay? And with that, we can add electronics to our skill board. Now it's time to move on to maybe one of, if not the most famous Pokemon 3D printed project. This is the Ghastly Humidifier. There's a good chance you've seen it before on Instagram, and I can't lie, it's really cool. It's so cool that a lot of people in my personal life have sent it to me. Looking at you, Yazid, I know you're watching. Now, Kim Chongdu provided a build guide for this project, but there's a couple of things that I need to point out for this. So after printing everything out, your first step is to screw in this atomizer with just enough force. This thing reverberates in a very specific way that basically turns water into mist. Then you set up your purple LED strip, your 5-volt fan, and this knob resistor to control its speed. And after wiring everything up to the atomizer's controller, it took me a few hours to figure out why this was only half working. You see, this is the wiring guide provided by Kim in her Instructables document, but here's my suggested change. Because yeah, if you wire everything up to the control board, you'll at best burn your finger, youch! And at worst, burn down your house. But eventually, I was able to follow the rest of the guide, add the final touches, and we're just about ready to go. Just need to add some water.
Oh, that's not good. You shouldn't, no, you're not supposed to, don't do that. If you ever do this, don't do that.
Okay, after drying everything off, now we're ready to go. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this was working, it just wasn't really picking up on camera. And I think part of this has to do with the fact that I used a UV light as opposed to a standard purple light, so that's on me. But eventually, after finagling around with the camera for a while, I finally got the effect to show up. Now to make this look better, I could have tweaked the atomizer's pressure, designed a case for all the electronics in the back, and swapped out the UV light for a purple one, but I think I'm done with Ghastly for today because I want to focus all my efforts on the final project. Because with that, we can add the power of vapor to the mix, and now, with a full team of 6 projects, I think we're finally ready to take on Mewtwo. Specifically, this Mewtwo Tank project by Willow Cookie on Thingiverse. To start, we obviously need to 3D print everything out, and that includes a few multicolor printnas as well. And as the description recommended, I had Harry print out the actual Mewtwo with resin, and it looks incredible. All I have to do is add a few coats of paint. And while that dries, let's set up the electronics. The blue LED strip goes down here, and we'll work the wires up these side poles, going into this mini air pump that will make the liquids flow. Speaking of which, I need to have a tank to hold all that liquid. And while I'd love to stumble around stores again, measuring glass receptacles in public, it thankfully turns out that a 23.7 ounce bottle of Smart Water fits it perfectly. But it still has water in it, so...
You know what they say, waste not, want not, bottoms up.
You know, there's times when I do something stupid for the bit, and it's usually worth it.
Ooh.
This was not one of those times. But after cutting the bottle down to size, we just need to add some thick gauge wire to Mewtwo to hold him into place. And this is where I start to go a bit off script, because I'm going to be using some food coloring to make some orange water, to mimic those orange blobs that you see in the beginning of Mewtwo Strikes Back. And similar to my Groudon eruption lamp, I'm going to be adding mineral oil so the orange water sinks to the bottom. And before we get the show started, let me just go over a few more details I added. This might be a bit shoehorned in, but to add the power of magnetism, the cable that powers everything snaps into place with magnets. And to add a water vapor effect, I printed out a mini tank holder for another atomizer, and I'm just going to be straight with you, it will not show up on camera. I swear the Torkoal Humidifier is the only time I had some good looking steam on this channel. But without further ado, it's time to see if everything actually works. Okay, that's not a... So what went wrong here? Well, it was just too much orange liquid. Not only did that make the whole tank yellow, but the bubbles it made just completely obscured Mewtwo and the rest of the tank. So let's extract as much orange liquid as possible, and try it one more time. And there we go. With all the skills we've learned today, that's a satisfying conclusion. And again, if you're interested in making any of these projects at home, the links are in the description.
And I also recommend checking out today's sponsor, Bambu Labs, and their A1 and AMS light system, because I wouldn't have been able to finish all these projects without them. Having multicolored prints really does open up a whole bunch of possibilities for projects. And the speed and consistency is something I've only experienced with Bambu printers. As I've said before, it's really easy to set everything up and quickly start printing whatever you want. And if you don't know how to model for yourself, you may have noticed that some of today's projects came from Maker World. And this is Bambu's community of creators that just have so many projects ready to print. They even have profiles that you can download per project so you can get started in just a few clicks. And if you've never 3D printed before, I do have to say now is absolutely the time to get started. Especially since Bambu Lab's Black Friday deal goes only until December 2nd. So check out my link in the description to get started today, and thank you Bambu Lab for sponsoring, and as always,
Special thanks to the executive level patrons: Pow Pow, Harley Jean, Grandma Watson, Marco Carini, Sally and Dave, Zebrameg, Connor Rhodes, Don Necco, Evan Timmerman, Jameson Zabalos, and Jimmers.